Is this live on Facebook? Oh, great. I guess we're live then. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Left Party of Sweden's Stockholm Pride webinar on LGBTQI activism in Europe. My name is Juliet Atto, and I'm a writer and journalist with background in feminist, anti-racist, and LGBTQI activism. And I'm based here in Stockholm, Sweden. And with me, I have an amazing panel of Oh, did I lose everyone?
No, I think we're still
on. I can't. Oh, is it on? Sorry, it just disappeared on my screen. Well, okay. But hi, hello again. With me, I have an exceptional panel of LGBTQI activists from across Europe, and they'll be presenting themselves. And we'll start with the very east, Georgia, with Natia.
Yeah, it's a bit weird because Georgia right now is in Stockholm.
Yes.
I'm Natia. I'm originally from Georgia, where I worked within the LGBTQ and feminist movement for more than 10 years. But since 2 years back, I've been living in Sweden, working for RFSL. But my focus is still on the Eastern Partnership countries and Russia. So focus still stayed on Georgia very much. Juliet, I think you're muted.
Oh, God.
The slogan of the pandemic, you're muted.
Yes, I must say, this is my first pandemic online panel discussion. But okay, so we continue on west.
Hi. I think we continue on east a bit. So my name is Olena Shevchenko, and I represent Inside Public Organization, which is based in Ukraine. We are LGBTQI/feminist organization, so basically working on intersectional basis. Thank you.
And then Kamil, from Poland.
Yeah. Hi all, my name is Kamil, I'm from Poland. The member of the left party in Poland. My party is called Razem, which means together. And also an LGBTQI activist, recently focused on so-called LGBT-free zones in Poland. I was presenting this topic in European Parliament with Malin, Björk, which is also here. Yeah, so that's all from me.
Thank you. So Silas.
Thank you. My name is Silas Aliki. I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden, and I work as a lawyer. 4 years ago, I founded Sweden's first LGBTQ law firm. And we represent asylum seekers, LGBT asylum seekers from all over the world, and also work with victims of crime and social law and trans-related legal issues. And of course, I'm also an activist within the community.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Malin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Malin Björk. I'm from Sweden. I'm right now in Göteborg on the west coast. So yes, probably most west of this panel. I'm a member of the Swedish Left Party, but working also as the LGBTI spokesperson and as a parliamentarian in the EU Parliament, where I work specifically on these issues. And we try to be both watchdogs and parliamentarians that drive these issues forward.
So thank you all so much for your presentations. So this discussion is about LGBTQI activism here in Europe. And as we all know, for the past, 10 plus years, there's been this new right-wing extremism wave that's been sweeping the whole world, and of course, including Europe. And I would like to know, what does LGBTQI rights look like, specifically if you look at trans people's rights in your specific country, especially in regards to this sort of right-wing extremist wave, and how does it affect the work that you do? Maybe we can start off with Kamil in Poland.
So since ages, actually nothing has changed according to the law in Poland for a good way. We still haven't got the registered partnerships or same-sex marriages. Adoption rights for the LGBT people is still not allowed, but what is it allowed is conversion therapy. In our criminal code, there is not such thing like a hate crimes based on sexual orientation. When it comes to the transgender right, I think it's only in Poland that in order to correct the gender in the legal documentation, transgender people need to sue their parents and prove with medical documentation that, and also the court might not agree to correct the gender. Also, if the transgender person is married and wants to make a legal gender change, they need to be divorced before the change. So they are forced to be divorced. And in Poland, there are no medical clinics where such surgical procedure might have place. So it's also difficult for transgender people. When it comes to the recent far-right movement, as you all might have heard, there are several local governments in Poland that call themselves free from so-called ideology, LGBT ideology, and also the public authorities are using a lot of hate speech. There are billboards and cars around the big cities with the pictures showing that comparing LGBT people to pedophiles, and they are all often protected by the police. What also caused this far-right movement is that, and the hate speech by the public authorities, the increase of hate crimes. We can see a lot of news about the hate crimes in Poland. Of course, they are not registered in our law. So we cannot see how much it increased, but we can feel it and the atmosphere. And there are some attempts to ban this so-called LGBT ideology across the whole Poland. So it's very worrying that such things happen in the center of Europe. That's from me.
Yes, thank you. Olena, do you see any similarities between the situations in Poland and in the Ukraine, where you're based?
Yes. Honestly, yes, I see a number of similarities, especially in the recent few years, because Poland and Ukraine, we're geographically close, but we're also close in terms of influence of, different narratives, like on the Russia, with the concept of traditional values. But to be honest, in Poland, I think it's not, very far in terms of different ideologies and in terms of conservatism, which is now trying to push LGBTQI people on the front line of the fight. And we also have the same things as, for instance, different conservative parties together with far rights movements trying to push women's rights in terms of abortions. At the same time, we see the trend of so-called fighting with gender ideology, which is now also trying to combine LGBTQI rights and also women's rights in one huge theme. So in terms of LGBTQI rights, we don't have any advancements during recent years, to be honest. We still don't have any partnership law or same-sex marriages, and even we don't have such a discussions, I mean, in terms of public opinion and also on the legislation level. We also don't have any protection from hate crimes. And several attempts to do something with legislation just failed in the parliament, especially because of all those trends on the patriotism and nationalism, which we have now as a response to the Russia aggression. But the main thing here, I would say, is a threat to so-called gender issues, because the main fight, it seems like in the whole world, and especially in our countries now, and Eastern and Western now Europe as well, is around gender. Because what they're trying to do, I mean, conservatives and women's rights, they're trying to do everything to push out any mentioning of gender or gender equality from the legislative level. And they also trying to push people's opinion, I mean, on the societal level, to put them the meaning of gender ideology instead of gender equality. So I think it directly influences on LGBTQI and especially now trans people as well. Because before in Ukraine, we never heard like conservatives or ultra rights said something about trans people. They were invisible for them. And now this is the issue. So now it's not only about homosexual people. It's not about gays or lesbians. It's also about trans people, because the recent law initiative, the draft law, which came to the parliament of Ukraine, it said about propaganda of homosexualism and transgenderism. So this is the main, things which is happening now. But talking about specifically transgender people, I would say that our situation on the legislative level now is better than in Poland, because 2 years ago we managed to put out this discriminatory legislation which requires obligatory sterilization and also divorces for trans people. Now it's regulated by the clinical protocol, which is enforced, so people can change their legal gender without medical interventions. So this is, of course, a bit better than in those countries which is surrounding Ukraine. But the trend on gender ideology, that's the main thing which we need to oppose now and oppose together.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm thinking with Georgia, for instance, and the rest of sort of the Eastern Partnership, Natia, do you want to add something to that or tell us more about that?
I can say that what we need to take for granted is that the level of political conservatism across the region, it's there. It's just always there. And we don't necessarily have political divisions across the lines of left, right, center as much as we have them across, who is supporting the so-called traditional values. You will have some leftists, go with like super traditional agenda. That's like, so it's a bit of a mess politically if we look at Georgia, but also other countries in the region. But Georgia is a bit of a specific example because despite this high level of conservatism, from legislative perspective, we're often seen, or Georgia is often seen as an exemplary sort of country, because we have the anti-discrimination law that includes sexual orientation, gender identity among the protected grounds overall, not just in the labor sections like in Ukraine, for instance, right? We also, even if the legislation does not recognize the concept of hate crime per se, sexual orientation, gender identity are included among the, or the bias based on sexual orientation, gender identity is included among the aggravating circumstances in the criminal code. And obviously proving the intent, and, this is an uphill battle that the activists have been, trying to tackle for a long time. And a lot of it the Istanbul Convention. Lot of space to right-wing populists to speculate on certain issues. For instance, the discourse around the anti-discrimination law when it was adopted in 2014 was that this government doesn't really care for you, poor people of Georgia. It cares about protecting the gays, So this creates like additional conflicts within the society because, those who have the power fail essentially willingly or unwillingly in some cases to really talk to people about the reforms that they're taking. When it comes to trans issues, the situation is much worse. For years, we have been, I was one of the people that started advocating for the reforms when it comes to legal gender recognition and access to trans-specific healthcare. And then my colleagues obviously continued also after I left. But the legal gender recognition is not really regulated by Georgian law. It's a gray area. So it's not like the procedure is not prohibited, but it's not really regulated. Nobody really knows what specifically is required. It is alleged that, medical interventions are required, but nobody can really give you an answer. So right now, there are cases in the European Court for Human Rights. So hopefully, based also on the precedents from other countries, Georgia will be able to get a very clear and good decision and will have to implement this decision into the legislation. But that has been an uphill battle because people's lives are spent while waiting for these procedures and regulations. And issues such as, marriage, reproductive health and rights, access to trans-specific healthcare, they're all up in the air because there's this gray area, and the Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Healthcare refuse to talk to each other essentially about these issues. So I would say that it's a bit of a weird case. In addition, the situation is that despite the positive legal reforms throughout the last years, the hostility of the society towards LGBTQI issues and people and our rights has been stably high. So it's that the environment is super hostile. And it's also because a lot of the politicians use these issues as a means for political speculations, as a means of attacking their political opponents. In addition, the role of the Georgian Orthodox Church is very strong, and it sort of feeds the political elites, and it is very conservative, and it is essentially anti-women's rights and anti-LGBT. So there are a lot of negative narratives coming, which result in the fact that we might have certain rights, like, for instance, right to hold peaceful manifestations, but we're not able to. And people are still not able to do that because the opposition is so high. And a lot of the attempts end in a bloody mess and physical violence. So that's shortly about Georgia.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to go to a country that might be seen as, the sort of blueprint when it comes to LGBTQI rights. Sweden, of course, that sort of, fronts itself as this very LGBTQI friendly country, but of course, far-right extremism has not missed Sweden either. I want to hear Silas. How have you seen sort of the change with LGBTQI rights, specifically trans people's rights in Sweden over the past sort of 10 years with this sort of far-right extremism here?
Well, I've seen it both as part of a movement, but also in my work, I can see that many of the ways that those issues are talked about also affects the agencies and the courts. For example, it's been a concentration in anti-trans rhetoric in Sweden the last 2 years. In public service media, in private media, there have been numerous attacks on especially trans youth. And sadly, what we see is that it's this sad coalition between left-identified feminists and the conservatives and the far right. And in Sweden, they have mostly been focusing on trans people and the trans movement. For example, the anti-abortion views, it's not possible to sell those to the public yet in Sweden. So everyone is uniting, so to say, around the anti-trans politics. And they are sort of finding each other there. And they are also increasingly getting platforms. They are interviewed in most nationwide media, and they are allowed to sell those ideas, which is essentially part of what you have all been mentioning, the anti-gender movement. But in Sweden, the easiest thing to focus on have been trans issues, because the anti-trans views in Sweden, they're deeply rooted, and they have not been gaining the wide acceptance, so to say, as, for example, gay and lesbian rights have been getting. But also we have a very, very strong and growing anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-Black rhetoric across the board from all parties. And that fuels into the anti-trans rhetoric as well. And they are amplifying each other so much. And of course, for me, that's very visible in the asylum cases I work in. You can see how those views of anti-Blackness, anti-Muslim views, and anti-trans views, they are sort of merging. And with the decision-making in the immigration authorities, you can see how those views are actually played out. You can see in the decisions when you see the rejection motivations that people get when they are seeking asylum, you can see the traces of the debate that has been going on across Europe. So what I see as the most pressing issues is the attacks on the trans movement, and also how extremely hard it is right now to be granted asylum as an LGBT asylum seeker, because the assessment of LGBT asylum seekers, they are super arbitrary. So when they are narrowing down and all talking about we need fewer immigrants, fewer people are supposed to get asylum here, one of the most hard-hit groups are LGBT asylum seekers, because those are easy to dismiss. They're just being told that you have not made credible that you are an LGBT person, so you're up for deportation. And that has been, it's getting harder and harder to get the protection that people have the right to get. And I think Sweden doesn't want to be responsible for the treatment of LGBT asylum seekers. And it's a huge issue, because there are also a very high number of LGBT asylum seekers due to the Swedish reputation. People are trying to come here because they have been told in so many ways that this is a good country for LGBT people, that you can get protection here and you will be respected. And then that doesn't happen. And this has been an ongoing issue for more than 20 years. LGBT asylum seekers are talking about the harsh treatment that they receive, that they are treated with homophobic views, anti-Black views, whatever it might be for the single person. But it's not changing; it's getting worse. And I think it shows what really what really are the views of Sweden when it all comes down to making a decision or something.
Thank you. So Malin, you work with these questions in the European Parliament on a European level, among many ways as a part of the LGBTI intergroup. So what have you seen? We can tie this into the second question about the work that is being done also to fight this. What is the difference that you've seen over the years with far-right extremism across Europe with your work as a European parliamentarian, and what are you doing to counter that?
Well, it's very clear that I was a part. This is my second mandate, so it means that I've been a parliamentarian for 5 years, and this is now running on the next 5 years. And it's clear that the extreme right, the far right, has grown. The nationalist right-wing parties have gained political weight nationally in some countries, as we have heard from several participants here, but also in the European Parliament. It means that we have to be even more vigilant, and we have to be even more uncompromising about, not stepping one single step back in terms of claiming our rights. And we do that in different ways. We try to, this word that I'm not so in favor of, the mainstreaming LGBTI rights into different kind of, it can be about employment rights, it can be about refugee rights, it can be about, freedom of movement, and that we try to speak specifically about the situation of LGBTI people in Europe when it comes to those issues. But also to have specific focus. So we did, like Kamil mentioned, when regions and cities start to do things like declaring themselves free of LGBTI or ideology, free of these people, free of us, and to also it's a ticket to increased hate and discrimination. So we took it very, very seriously, and we made a plenary debate. We made the resolutions extremely clear in its message that this is not acceptable. We have actually even had the European Commission kept accountable in terms of the kind of financing. Now we read that they are not going to do these twinning cities, friendship cities. They receive some amounts to do that kind of work. Some Polish cities are being warned that they will not get this. But all the other money that's coming from Europe should also be concerned. You should not be receiving money to dismantle human rights, basically. So we try to work in different ways in terms of following the money, making reminding of the European law that is somehow, there are big gaps, and I can speak about those also, but there are certain laws that are actually there in place that prohibits discrimination, so we try to work on those also. But I think most of all, at least in the cross-party group where I'm active, and I would say, it's very clear that this big threat comes from the far right and the nationalist conservative right when it comes to our right. What we try to do is to work with the movement, whether that be in Sweden, Belgium, Poland, or Ireland. And I just want to mention, that we have seen fantastic developments in some countries like Ireland in the last couple of years. So things can go in the right direction also. And I try to remind myself of that sometimes when I hear kind of horrible things coming through the microphones in all different languages, basically. But so to work with the movements, to be parliamentarians that are extremely connected to what's actually going on the ground.
So thank you. So Kamil, you're a board member of the Left Party in Poland. How are you working? Or are you working, like with Malin said, with the movements, with grassroots movements, for instance? So how does the work look like in Poland for the Left Party there?
Okay, I would say also about the left and just the LGBT movement. Normally, before the pandemic situation, we had a huge amount of prides in Poland. Like each year, this number was growing, and also the number of participants was growing. We've got like 6 voivodeship, the areas, and at least there was one in each. So it shows that this movement is growing. But this year there was not like such thing like prides in Poland due to pandemic, and I'm not sure if because of this, but the far right was more involved in fighting for LGBT people and their rights. What we are doing as a left party is trying to show the solidarity in each way. Because now the public television and also during the election campaign said very like a lot of homophobic statements that politicians were saying things like the LGBT people is a subculture, which is very dangerous because it's cause suicide for children, and it was manipulation of statistics, but it's treated as a true. And if you want to dismiss it, you need to like set a lot of scientific proofs that they are wrong, and they usually not allow you to do this. We are trying to do this every time like this topic is public, and recently it's very often. Also, when our current president said that LGBT are not people but an ideology, we set a clear message in every time when we were on television that we support you, that we are the people, and we have the rights to love. As an activist, I also participate in creating such thing like it's called Atlas of Hate. It shows all the areas which passed the local declaration of being free of LGBT ideology. It helped a lot, like people from other countries to see how it looks like in Poland. Also, we created with All Out the petition to partnership towns from Poland with the list of things how they can support LGBT community in Poland in their twin-ship towns. And support, for example, like some anti-discriminatory programs for the young people. Unfortunately, some of them decided to freeze the partnership as a warning. Also, as there's a COVID-19, we, as the LGBT community, are organizing some online events. And like Malin and I said before, we were working on the resolution from European Parliament to have a clear stand from European politicians that they are supporting us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, Olena, as a human rights defender and educator, how does the fight against the far right movement looks like in the Ukraine, and how long have you been a part of it?
To be honest, this is a huge fight which started since 2014 from the Euromaidan revolution, because the rise of nationalism started there. And basically now it is very unpopular, for instance, in Ukraine, to criticize the nationalist views, because nationalism is equal to patriotism in Ukraine. And of course, this is a huge narrative now, which is almost homogeneous, especially then we talk about human rights defenders or different organizations. It's very, obvious that now the space to criticize those views is shrinking. So it is not safe anymore to tell something against the nationalism. And those patriots and nationalists who is at the same time homophobic and also transphobic and misogynist, they are trying to impose this, view that the gender ideology is something bad and coming, of course, from the West. So basically, we have very weird situation that Ukrainian nationalists and conservatives, they share the same values as in Russia, which is based on traditional values and which is based also on the limitation of rights. And this is really opposed to those values which we try, for instance, to propagate. It's opposed to freedoms, it's opposed to rights, human rights, and everything like that. So, but this atmosphere of the fear and also unsafety, because what they are doing, they are not just, proposing draft laws, or for example, they are not just blocking the ratification of Istanbul Convention, like the Council of Churches of Ukraine doing. They also have these ultra-right groups, different types of groups, and they are very violent. And what they are doing, they are trying to push us back from the streets, from the public sphere to, like they call us, go to home and sit on the closed doors. But this is not the case, because even if you are sitting at home, they will come to you in a few days, So basically, the main thing now is about what all of the nation in Ukraine, what the society think about human rights. And the problem is that people just still don't know what does it mean, human rights. They more tend to the conservative values, because they understand the traditional values, that's something good. This is not obvious for them, what does it mean, traditional values? But they all know that it's something good, and they can support it in any time. And the main opposition now for us is the local elections, which will take place in November. And all the political parties trying to use these conservative values. And of course, this is very popular because you don't have to do anything, on the level of supporting people or economical rights. No, you're just saying that you are supporting conservative values and you are against Soros, for instance, because that's another trend. Like they call us that we are Soros children, and they also trying to, bring that image that we are Western agents which trying to destabilize Ukrainian situation. And this is, believe me, the main, picture which were in Russia a few years ago. So the foreign agents law, for instance, come from that. So what we are doing to do now, we are trying to do, we're trying to build this coalition based on solidarity between feminist, women's organization, even those who are not calling themselves women's organization, not feminists. We are trying to build a huge movement around the protection of women's rights, which also inclusive now towards LGBTQI. We are trying to build this coalition with promo women with disabilities, with all those women who works, in the field during recent 20 years, no matter, because you need to push people together if they understand that the next step will be limitation of their rights. So that's why we are trying to put our efforts around organization of women's marches, which is also this advocacy and mobilization tool, which gives the force also now towards the ratification of Istanbul Convention. For us now, this is the main fight, because if we will push for that and it will happen, it will give the sign to the society that gender equality is very important issue. And gender equality, of course, it's about LGBTQI.
Thank you. And we will talk more about some collaboration between movements for the next question. Banatia, you've also worked for many years within feminist and LGBTI movements. How does those movements look like, sort of within the Eastern Partnership and the work that you've been involved with?
Yeah, a lot of things that have been said resonate with the situation in Georgia, but also elsewhere in the region. I think that step one, I think that for quite some time, the activists across different countries felt that, the appearance of these like far-right or neoconservative groups is a sign of backlash that is sort of like proportional to the advancements that we as activists and as emancipatory movements make, and that it would blow over. But then over time, and especially in the last 5 years, I think it became pretty clear that it's not blowing over, and it's these are the groups that either already have connections within the political elites or are striving very hard to get those connections. So I think right now a big chunk of opposition to these movements is actually learning more about them. And both me and Olena work with the coalition that's called the Eastern European Coalition for LGBT+ Equality with them. So RFSL is partnering with this coalition of organizations from Eastern Partnership countries and Russia. And we recently did a mapping of the anti-gender movements across the region. And we see that these movements, they're like a puzzle consisting of different pieces. And these pieces are represented in different proportions in different countries based on a number of things from, political to social, cultural, and economic situation. And we see that in Georgia, for instance, as well as in Ukraine, there is a mix. There are far-right groups. In Ukraine, they are stronger than in Georgia, or more numerous than in Georgia because of, the momentum that they had with Maidan and the annexation of Crimea. In Georgia, they have been weaker, but they're gaining power. But there's also the so-called, neoconservative or, traditionalist civil society groups that say that they concern themselves with, the traditional family, children's rights, demographic issues, when in principle they only, what they do is they attack women's reproductive health and rights and, rights of LGBTQI people. And these groups, together with the churches that are very strong, especially in Georgia with the Orthodox Church and the conservative politicians, they present a united front very often because they have this one or two things on their agenda that they share. So their position towards Russia may be different. Their structure and political ideology, specifically in relation to religion or, fascism, may be a bit different. But they have these shared things on the agenda, and they often present, a united front. And we need to consider that, and we started learning more about that. So there's growing body of research about these. And I must say that it's often spoken about Russian involvement in different, far-right groups, and we know, there is evidence of that. But there's also an indirect influence. Russia has a toolbox for conservative laws, policies, and a message box that is essentially ready. It's super shareable, and it just goes around. And this is what these people use, even if they don't per se agree with, Russia's policy in, Georgia or, Ukraine or elsewhere in the world. So this is another important thing to consider. So I think that within the Georgian context, what the activists are doing very actively is trying to highlight the behavior, the messages, and the atrocities that some of the far-right groups commit, and also fight against the impunity that a lot of these people enjoy, because nobody really wants to concern themselves with, hate crimes or discrimination of LGBTQI people, because, the public opinion is so much, against us. So this is one thing. And I mean, there's building bridges between the movements, but I guess that's sort of the next question.
Yes, exactly. And I have to quickly say to follow us to Vänsterpartiet Storstockholm's Facebook page quickly. We'll be shut out here in about a minute, but we have 15 more minutes to talk. and hopefully answer some viewer questions. So just come to the Facebook page, and we're there live.